Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I was going to say we've got a minute yet anyway. So we need to print it on both sides, don't we?
Yeah, you do. Just so I know who I am.
So you know who you are, okay.
Yeah. So they just
It's good that you start because you touch on the proper strategy.
sorry.
Strategy. Yeah.
Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the first meeting of the Environment ONS Committee for 2019-20. I'd like to invite the committee to confirm the appointment of Councillor Carol Coburn as Chairman of the Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee for the Council year 2019-20.
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kim. Moving then on to item 2, the appointment of the Vice Chairman, and I would like to invite the committee to confirm the appointment of Councillor Martin Darcy as Vice Chairman.
Agreed.
Moving on then to the minutes, very difficult because most of us weren't there at the meeting, so I think as it's a new council we will take them. I know you were there, Councillor Hyman. Are you going to say anything other than agree?
No, I'd recommend everybody agrees them because they are accurate. So
That's what I assumed. Apologies for absence and any substitutions. Is that you, Wendy? Kim?
Yes, we have apologies from councillors Brian Edmonds and Paul Vivers, and we have Councillor Ruth Reid and Councillor Jerry Hyman here as substitutes.
Do we have any declarations of interest or any matter on the agenda? Have we received any declarations? No declaration. Anyone have an interest they wish to declare now? Do we have any questions from members of the public?
None submitted.
Any questions from members?
None submitted.
Right, which moves us rapidly on to item 8. Just before we get there, can I just have a brief word about this meeting and who we are, because just seeing Joan and Jenny have a quick look at each other's name. We did wonder about going round, but quite frankly, you won't remember anything anyone says. You've got the names in front of you, and I hope over the coming year we will get to know each other and be friends. You know, overview and scrutiny is not party political, it's just a group of people who do what they should be doing, which is scrutinising the work of the executive. It's a bit difficult at the moment because we haven't got an executive work programme, so you know, very much this is a catch-up, as it were, meeting, an introductory meeting for us to find out from the service heads what we're supposed to be looking at, and again see what we can put on our work programme. Although those of you who've read your committee papers will know that it's fairly meaty before we even think of another topic. So I think, you know, we may have to be a little bit steadily on this one, but do apologise for the colour. I was going to wear my dark glasses. I see Michaela's brought hers.
Yes.
You're not going to lose your papers, are you, this colour? It reminds me of those socks that they used to have, bright pink and bright green. So that moves us on to our service presentations. I'm sure Richard is going to go first, Richard Homewood from the Environmental Services. I'm sure you're far too young to have worn socks this colour.
Could possibly go on.
If you would like to start off our presentations, that would be great.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. I just wanted to briefly give an overview of the range of services covered by environmental services and perhaps highlight some of the key issues we're facing over the year 1920 and beyond in terms of the services we provide. So To put it into context, you'll know about the corporate strategy that was adopted last year, which focused on people, places and prosperity. I always have trouble with that word, sorry. I always say prosperity. That's not quite the right word, is it? Prosperity. So that's what the corporate strategy is targeting and aiming on, and that's, from our perspective in environmental services, is about protecting people and serving people. It's about protecting and enhancing the place and supporting prosperity and economic development by supporting businesses in the community, and I'll come on to how we do that. So the services that are there that we provide that protect people and serve people are environmental health, and I'll go into more detail in a moment, licensing, emergency planning, refuse and recycling, the joint enforcement initiative, our car parking services there. And in terms of the place, it's environmental protection, that's protecting the environment around us, recycling, street cleaning, sustainability, car parking again in terms of enhancing the place, and the joint enforcement initiative about keeping it clean and preventing contamination and pollution. And then in terms of supporting economic development and businesses, environmental health again comes into that. Parking services is about providing facilities for customers, for businesses. Emergency planning is about building resilience in business and helping businesses develop business continuity plans. And the joint enforcement initiative is all about supporting economic development and preventing things that will cost businesses and cost people money. So environmental services covers all three strands of the corporate strategy, and I just wanted to put that in perspective, but I'm sure my colleagues will talk about how their services link into that corporate strategy as well. So very quickly, that's the service structure, with myself, with 5 key managers there, dealing with environmental health, licensing and enforcement, environmental services and parking, sustainability and projects, and emergency planning and resilience. So that's how it's structured and how it's set up, and I'll go into more detail. So environmental services, the key issues for us. Environmental services is about refuse collection, recycling, street cleaning, and it's about maintaining. There's 2 key things. We have a new contract starting on the 1st of November this year. That contract went through the overview and scrutiny process. We had an overview and scrutiny working party to decide how we moved our refuse and street cleaning services forward. And it was 4 colleagues of yours from this overview and scrutiny committee that worked on that project. And eventually the contract was awarded to BIFA through competitive tendering. We looked at all the options, bringing it in-house, joint working with other local authorities, or straightforward tendering, and at the end of the day, the straightforward competitive tendering process was seen to offer the best value for money and the best service. That starts in November, and we're busy working with BIFA to mobilise that contract and get everything ready for the change on the night of the 31st of October, the 1st of November. The other challenge we face, of course, is keeping Veolia performing until that change. They've now got 5 months left on their 4 months left on their contract, and it's about keeping the performance of Veolia up to standard until they depart and BIFA come in. So 2 key challenges there: one, mobilising a new contract; the other, keeping the current contractors' performance up until they go. It is a service that's very focused on customer satisfaction. We pride ourselves on street cleaning performance, mist bin performance, keeping a number of mist bins down as low as possible, maximising recycling and promoting and pushing people to recycle. And we offer the garden waste service as well, which is increasing, its customer base is increasing year on year, so that's a very well received service as well. Part of the new contract in the new year, not straight away, but in the new year, will be what they call route optimisation, which is all about looking at whether they can change the collection routes and rounds to make it more efficient and more effective. And then there'll be additional curbside collections, and we'll start to collect textiles and small electrical appliances at the curbside from every household. So the whole range of recyclable material will then be collected at the curbside, so people won't have to necessarily go to a community recycling centre with their material in the future. The government is working on a new waste and resources strategy, and I'm sure you've seen the discussion about that, about compulsory food waste collections. We're ahead of the game on that already. About standardising the materials you can recycle, and a lot of other proposals in there about single-use plastics and plastic bottles, return schemes and that sort of thing as well. So a huge agenda there in terms of the strategy going forward. And then the planning and development of future waste, refuse and street cleansing services. Environmental health is about food safety, health and safety at work, accident investigations, food complaints, those sorts of things. So that's about working with businesses, making sure businesses comply with the law, making sure businesses don't give you food poisoning or spread infection, and making sure they're up to standard. And our officers visit food businesses on a frequency basis based on risk. And you'll see these signs in food premises, food hygiene ratings. 5 is good. Go for the 5s, don't go for the 0s or 1s, I think is the message. They don't have to display those signs. So you won't necessarily see many 0s and 1s on display. Most people who get 4s and 5s want to display them to say we are very good, but you don't very often get people wanting to display a 0 to say we're awful. So that's an indication for the public that we're doing our job and that the businesses are doing their job as well in producing safe food for you. The health and safety is all about employees in the workplace, making sure that they're not put at risk by work activities. And we visit a whole range of workplaces. Essentially anything that's not a factory, anything that doesn't make something, is the responsibility of the local authority to visit and make sure the health and safety compliance is there. A key area for environmental protection in Waverley is air quality, and you'll be aware of the controversy there's been in the last few years about air quality in Waverley. I think it's fair to say we've done an awful lot of work in the last 18 months to 2 years to put things right. Things weren't right, and we've addressed that and moved things forward considerably. We've now got an air quality steering group, an air quality working group in Farnham where there are particular problems. And we're just about to produce our annual air quality status report. That's due at the end of June, and that will go to DEFRA for their comments before it's published, and people can see it and comment on it. And once that's in place, we can then begin work with the air quality steering group and the air quality working group on an air quality action plan to see what we can do to improve air quality in Waverley. And that's will pursue the National Clean Air Strategy. The Environment Protection Team also deals with a raft of other issues that I'm sure you'll all have occasion to talk about with your constituents: noise complaints, contaminated land, private water supplies, and a whole lot of stuff around prescribed processes, the recent issues around oil and gas exploration discussions in Dunsfold. We've been involved in that with Paul and colleagues in planning. Pest control, we have a new contract to negotiate this year for pest control in the borough. And stray dogs, we have a statutory duty to collect stray dogs, and that service is increasingly costly for us. It's not so much the number of dogs now, but the fact that there's little interest in doing that work for us, so the costs that we're getting passed on to us are higher. Interestingly, with stray dogs, social media has had a huge impact on stray dog rehoming. Our stray dog numbers have gone down. Many stray dogs are repatriated through social media before they get to us, which is good. But we do have a duty to deal with any that aren't repatriated. The Joint Enforcement Initiative was introduced 2.5, 3 years ago, and that was about trying to be more effective in the way we work in partnership with the police and other enforcement agencies, to join up our enforcement activity, share intelligence and target problem areas more effectively. We are working on public space protection orders. There was one introduced from the 1st of January to deal with dog fouling and people who fail to clear up after their dogs. We're now working on one about dog controls, that's dogs on lead, and where people should have their dog on a lead, where they can let it roam free, and where maybe they have to put it on a lead if they're directed to by an enforcement officer, if the enforcement officer thinks the dog's not being controlled properly. And I saw there was something in the local paper this week about deers being attacked by dogs. So there are some issues in Waverley about dog attacks on wildlife, which we also have to consider. And then we'll be looking at the vexed issue of the number of dogs one person exercises. And again, there seems to be a real issue in Waverley with what they call professional dog walkers, who open a van and let out a large number of dogs, and whether they're actually in control of those animals. So that's one for the future that we're going to look at, but that will be the most challenging one of those issues around dog control and responsible dog ownership. Litter enforcement, fly tipping enforcement is all about deterring fly tipping, deterring littering, promoting awareness of the impacts of that on the environment, but also about, if we have to use enforcement powers to penalise people for doing it. So litter enforcement, we've got a contract with East Hants District Council where they patrol Waverley at the moment at nil cost to the borough and issue fixed penalty notices to people who are caught littering. Fly tipping enforcement we do ourselves, and fly tipping enforcement we've issued a number of penalty notices for that, which are £300 each. So it's quite a penalty if you're caught fly tipping, but we do still have an increasing problem with fly tipping in the borough. We have an issue with unauthorised encampments in the borough, and we do have a protocol for dealing with those, and colleagues across the whole council, from the Parks and Countryside team to the Planning Service and Environmental Health, all work together to address the issues around unauthorised encampments. And that protocol and that partnership working with the police has proved effective in managing unauthorised encampments and moving people on quickly when that occurs. And then we're working closely with the police through the Joint Action Group and the Community Safety Partnership on things like serious organised crime, working together to tackle some of the underlying issues around serious organised crime which you perhaps wouldn't imagine are going on in a place like Waverley. That can be things like modern slavery, drugs, a whole raft of criminal activity going on under the surface that isn't always obvious, but has a huge impact on the community. We have licensing in two areas. One is environmental health, which is all about animal welfare licensing. A new legislation on that came in this year, so that's caused a peak in work for that we have to address, and that's causing concern to a lot of animal welfare businesses because of the impact of that new legislation. We license scrap metal dealers and scrap metal sites, and that's about preventing, discouraging metal theft and dealing with stolen material. We're looking at street trading policies once every 5 years. That's allowing people to trade on the street, and that can cause some controversy. I know it's been an issue in Cranley in the past. It's been an issue in Godalming here in the past, street trading. And then there's things called special treatments. And that's things like ear piercing, tattooing, any skin piercing activity that could have a health implication through infectious disease and that sort of thing. The other side of licensing, which isn't strictly within this committee, is taxi and private hire vehicle licensing and driver licensing. We are reviewing the charges on that to make sure we recover the full cost of licensing and administering that. There is a licensing committee and a licensing subcommittee that deal with licensing matters because it is a quasi-judicial process. So it's kept into a separate committee structure to deal with that. Car parking is always a contentious issue. We have lots of car parks in Waverley, and it's about how do we manage those car parks. So we are looking this year at a review of the parking strategy. That's the overall strategy for dealing with our car parks, and that's looking at things like how we manage the asset. It's a huge asset for the council, our car parks. Are they in the right place? Is the land valuable for other uses? Could we release some of that land as for a capital receipt and add capacity in car parks where people want them? Because some of our car parks aren't necessarily where people really want them. We've got a number of refurbishment programs underway this year. South Street car park in Farnham is desperately in need of some TLC, and we're working on that at the moment. You'll be aware that Wayhill Fairground Car Park was deregistered as common land last year, and we're working towards resurfacing that and introducing charging there to manage that properly and ensure that there's space available there for local people and the businesses to park as well as commuters. And then we were looking at Village Way Car Park in Cranley, and that was due to be resurfaced this year, and I'm sure Kelvin will explain that it may not happen this year now or next year because of issues around what do we do with the leisure centre in Cranley. So there's an issue to deal with there. Height barriers on car parks has been a vexed issue. It was intended to deter unauthorised encampments in our car parks, but as always we come up against conservation issues, we come up against access issues with people who've got access rights across our car parks. So it's not been an easy one to deal with, and we've managed to put one or two in, but we're working through it to see if we can get some more put in before we get some more unauthorised encampments. Our parking enforcement contract has just been renewed for 5 years, so we contract that out to NSL, a private company, to enforce the parking restrictions in our car parks. And one of our recent initiatives now, we're about to install electric vehicle charging points in one car park in each of the 4 main settlements. As a trial, that's an initial trial to see what the uptake's like, and that may well be extended further once we get it off the ground. And there's a 10-year maintenance programme behind the car parks, which is a capital budget to keep them up to scratch. So where do we go in the future? Well, the council has changed, the emphasis of the council is changing, and certainly I'm already beginning to have conversations about sustainability, a carbon neutral council, energy efficiency plans. We already produce a greenhouse gas emissions report aiming at reducing energy consumption in our buildings, reducing our contractors' energy consumption, looking at energy efficient heating systems in our residential properties, and whenever we refurbish buildings, looking at energy efficiency and carbon reduction as a key priority. I've already touched on electric and vehicle charging. We're also looking at using electric and hybrid vehicles for the council fleet in the future as a way forward. And then lastly, emergency planning is all about planning for disaster. So it's all about flood, fire and famine, if you like. Hopefully we won't get the famine, but we've had the floods, we've had the fire, and we certainly had the severe weather as well in terms of snow and that sort of thing. And that's about protecting vulnerable people, warning and informing the public in case something like this happens, so that we can encourage people to think about it in advance and make their own arrangements. It's about building community resilience, helping communities help themselves in the event of an emergency, and then about business continuity, about helping businesses plan for disaster. And we plan ourselves as a local authority, as a business, what would we do if this building went out of action, if this building caught fire, what would we do to keep the business going? What are our priorities if we wanted to get businesses up and running again after that sort of thing? So we have a plan which says these are the key services we must get up and running very quickly, and these are the services that can wait a bit longer. So we've worked all that through, and we've had some interesting debates about whose services are more important than others. I'm sure you can imagine those sorts of discussions going on. I'll put this up. It is part of our emergency planning, and you wouldn't believe how much work it's taken up talking to colleagues across Surrey and across the southeast of England, planning for Brexit, and then it was all put on hold, so we're all in a hiatus at the moment waiting for the next decision to be made. But it does impact on us here. You might not think so, but we've been working on what happens if the M25 suddenly becomes a big car park. The M20 is already planned for stacking lorries on, and if the channel ports jam up, that will get back onto the M25. So there's already thinking that way. The other way, if Portsmouth jams up, the A3 will become a lorry park as well. So we're right in the middle of all that. And we're looking with the emergency services about if that sort of thing happens, how will the emergency services get around the area to respond to emergencies and that sort of thing. So lots going on around Brexit, even though we don't know what's going on quite at the moment. And then lastly, looking after the council itself. I'm sorry, it's an awful
last,
lot. Corporate health and safety, very quickly, we're responsible for making sure the council complies with the law and making sure that the council protects its own staff and doesn't put its own staff at risk, and that includes things like managing stress in the workplace. It's increasingly a priority for us now, but also making sure our contractors comply with the law as well, and looking at our own business continuity, as I said already. So that's a whistle-stop tour through environmental services.
I'm actually going to overrule you because I honestly don't think we can take questions on this. And the reason I say that is that we'd be here all night, Richard. I mean, it is such a broad spectrum of areas that you cover, and we really would. So I want this to be an information evening. Anything that we have taken down, I've taken things, we'll take it up with you after the meeting. Otherwise, if we all decide that there's one issue we want to talk about, I'm not going to make any exceptions, Councillor Gray.
I was only going to say, can we have a copy of the slides?
Yes, would that be possible? Richard, could we have a copy of it so that we can remind ourselves what you've said? Because there is just so much there. We really will be here all night because somebody will want one point, somebody another. So thank you very much. That was really interesting, and it just shows you the breadth that we're going to be scrutinising. So should we move on now? Is Paul going to take over? Paul McKim, for those of you who haven't met him, our interim head of planning.
Thank you very much. Good evening. I'll just run you through very quickly the sort of the overview of the planning service and its relationship, particularly with national policy, which is very important to us in terms of service delivery. So, very briefly, definition of planning. This is taken out from the National Planning Policy Framework. Purpose of the planning system to contribute to the achievement of sustainable development. Meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And that's a recognised definition of sustainability and recognised in terms of planning. Very briefly, you'll know this certainly better than I. In terms of spatial profile, population 121,000, Waverley covering about 133 square miles. The important bits, it's a rural borough. 77% of the area is outside of Bachelor great landscape, and of that 71%, 61% is in the green belt, and that generates its own challenges, and in particular, which is not on the side, with two SBAs in immediate vicinity as well. In terms of the planning service, 69 posts, of which 57 are FTE, approximately full-time equivalents. And that represents about 17% of Waverley's workforce, so it's a large planning unit. Budget, this is 1.95 million net, and in terms of income, 1.45 million coming in, principally through planning application fees and also charges that we make for pre-application advice, pre-application confidential advice, so that's before the full plan applications are submitted to us. Developers and householders come to us for advice on matters. So we three units effectively. Development management with Beth Howden-Smith is the development manager. Policy team, which Graham is the manager of, and we have a very small economic development team as well, which is 2 people. Economic development is a non-statutory function, but it's certainly a growing function within Waverley, and something that certainly before I arrived there was a decision to move it into the planning service, and that's I think helped us particularly on the development management side. When we're discussing applications, particularly those in sort of hotels, leisure type applications, we've had enjoying quite a good relationship with the guys in that. In terms of measurements, P124A dealt with about 1,700 planning applications. However, that excludes things like condition discharges, and most planning applications will have a long list of condition charges. NMAs, lawful certificates, there's a whole range. So roughly we're looking at about 2,500 applications, if you like, in its broad terms, that come through the service. And I've just given you a brief sort of breakdown in terms of how that sits, and the householder being the dominant function there. So, development plan. We talk a lot about development plans, and when I've been giving members briefings recently, I've been talking about the relationship with the development plan and how the development plan is the material consideration in our committee reports, and that's the first thing you will see in the committee report is our response to the development plan. So we have the Part 1 plan, retained policies from 2002. We also sit with, obviously, within Surrey, and Surrey has its minerals and waste plan, and we have neighbourhood plans and emerging neighbourhood plans. In total, neighbourhood plans we're looking at 13, with two currently, well, one made, one about to be made, and then others coming over the hill at us. In terms of the policy framework, I've mentioned the National Policy Framework, and I'll just give you a quick overview of some key headers in that. But essentially we're in a plan-led system, so development plan, NPPF as you call it, and local plans. That's essentially how we work within that system, and there are other plans that we have, SPDs in particular, but on design. So the relationship with the NPPF and plan making, so the plan should provide a framework, paragraph 15. Local plans include strategic policies, and we have a balanced approach here. Some authorities just have one local plan. We have our sort of Part 1 plan, which is the strategic policies, and then Part 2 adds that detail. And it's that detail that's really important, I think, particularly in terms of where we context, because that gives you the colour really around plan making and what that's about. And then duty to cooperate. When we go to a planning examination, the first question the inspector always asks us is how we complied with the legal duty to cooperate. And we demonstrate to that, and if he says yes, then he agrees, and she agrees, we move on. If there's any query around that or any concern around that, the planning examination will stop and the inspector will not go on and then look at other matters. So it's very important that we meet that duty to cooperate. In relation to housing, we talk about the 5-year supply in terms of housing requirements and housing needs, and I'll come on to that in a little bit more detail later on. Economy. Part of this is in terms of assisting business to invest, expand, and particularly adapt. Adapt is, if you take the high street and you see the changes that have gone on in the high street in recent years, and in changes in retail that's gone on in recent years, and then you look at climate change and other matters, there's a huge amount of adaptation going on in the economy, and one of our jobs is trying to assist that and bring that through. And particularly in our context, supporting the rural economy as well is very important to us. Greenbelt, put this in. Also, exceptional specific policies in relation to Greenbelt with exceptional circumstances, and in terms of changes, they can only really be established through the strategic policy set. And recently, neighbourhood plans can also make amendments to green boundaries as well. Climate change, very important, and this is coming through the piece now in practically everything that we do, and in response to this, and particularly in terms of sort of technical standards and improving technical standards around housing design and housing operation is starting to come through, and Part 2 plan will need to respond to that as it emerges. Part 1 I've mentioned, so I won't dwell on that too much, but in terms of the overall number, in terms of our housing requirements. Part 2, we're currently working, still got some work to continue on the Part 2 plan. Intentions of sort of a preferred options submission in the summer, then work through to the preferred plan, and then likelihood in terms of publication next year, sort of March time next year, and then adoption. Final adoption would be, well, we talked about this morning with Graham, probably around October, November time next year, so we're going through the process there. And once Part 2 is adopted, that would replace all the current the SAVE policies that we use in the 2002 plan. Neighbourhood plans, as I mentioned, sort of 13 on the go. One made, one very much nearly there, well, practically there. And just working through those processes, and this is a really big area of work for us, and it's one that we're really committed to supporting. Just as an aside, when neighbourhood plans did come to the fore 4 or 5 years ago, I wasn't quite sure how that would work out from a planning sort of professional context. But I've been really enthused by the way local communities have embraced neighbourhood planning and moved through it and taking it on, and it's a real positive step in moving forward. We have SIL, which is, in terms of, it came to effect from 1st of March, and there will be some issues for us in terms of around viability testing, and already developers are saying to us, you have SIL, it's a high charge, therefore we can't meet this or we can't meet that. So there are some challenges within SIL, and that's something that we're going to have to explore further. And equally, there will be challenges in terms of how we go about as an advisory body, advisory group, awarding SIL to various sort of bits of infrastructure throughout the borough, and that itself will have challenges. Section 106 agreements, they haven't gone away. There's a sort of view, because now we have SIL, we don't have Section 106. Section 106 still has a role, particularly in terms of affordable housing and other matters that perhaps don't fit within the SIL, don't clearly fit within the SIL regime. We can pick those up. And in terms of legal tests, 3 legal tests around SIL, around Section 106 and SIL actually, which I've highlighted there. Types of plan applications we get right across the board, but these are the main ones. And as I've said in the previous stat, the PASL applications are the vast majority. And then on sort of major, what we call majors, we tend to get outline applications with reserved matters that follow with conditions, and then other consented schemes that come through the process that we also follow. Then the common themes that come out of all of that. Viability and delivery is a key one. Affordable housing, and we are going to be doing a little presentation on 17th of July on affordable housing to members, so it's an informal presentation from ourselves to expand our sort of knowledge on that. Highways and car parking, flood risk, habitat, impacts in green belt, countryside, design and appearance and neighbour impacts are sort of the common themes that tend to arise through, particularly through our planning applications. Then we have an enforcement team as well, and these are essentially what they have up their sleeve, and we work very closely with Richard's team around enforcement on lots of matters. And that's essentially it.
Yeah, so once again, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to curtail debate. I just think we should go through the presentations. We're then going to look at, anyway, the sort of more detailed information. I think we'll have plenty of time. But we do have to move on, otherwise we'll never get round to the work programme. So if we could go straight on to Kelvin.
Yeah.
Kelvin Mills, those of you who haven't met Kelvin, who's going to talk to us about
commercial service, yes, commercial service.
Chairman, are we going to those slides?
Yes, can we, yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
Because I think that'll be the basis for a lot of discussion later.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. My name's Kelvin Mills. I'm the Head of Commercial Services for Waverley. Large parts of my service will be covered at other ONS meetings, so that'll be the Community Wellbeing meeting tomorrow evening, which covers a vast majority of my service, and Value for Money ONS, which is where I'll be bringing forward a draft commercial strategy for Waverley going forward to deal with the medium-term financial plan issues. So I thought it would be useful, even though I'm not fully here for my whole service, I'll just give you a brief sort of run through my service, sort of service plan sort of highlights for the next 3 years. So as I said, I'm the head of commercial services. I have 6 direct reports, and that ranges from building control, arts and culture, Careline, which I'll talk about later, Waverley Training Services, leisure centres and leisure service manager, and green spaces. So green spaces, surprise, is the element that falls under this OMS committee. So the leisure service is in essence management of our 5 leisure centres through a contract with Places Leisure. And the prime objective obviously is increasing activity and health and well-being of our residents. So we've been on quite a large investment in our leisure centres over the last 7 years, and we are currently looking for the next tranche to see how we can further enhance the service for our residents. So the key priorities during this service plan timescales are refurbishment of Godalming and Farnham Leisure Centre. So Godalming's increasing change room space and gym primarily, which is really to deal with current demand as well as projected future need. Farnham Leisure Centre again is an extension to the front of the building, looking at bringing a climbing facility, soft play and enhanced sort of cafe area. This is in essence again through an identified need for our indoor leisure facility strategy now as well as into the future to deal with the demands placed on it by sort of development within the area. So those are 2 key refurbishment projects which will deliver a financial return for the council as well. So the investment comes with a commitment from the Places Leisure, our management contractors, to pay us an increased management fee for that investment. A larger project which will take slightly longer than the timescale of 19 to 2022 is Cranny Leisure Centre. So Cranny Leisure Centre sits within Village Way Car Park, which is what my colleague Richard was talking about earlier, and it was built mid-70s. It was the first of our leisure centres that we invested in back in 2009, but that was purely to some extent cosmetic. We moved some services around within the building structurally, and we didn't touch the main structure of the building, and we didn't touch any of the mechanical and electrical issues. So what we've got is an ageing structure and M&E sort of plant room that we as a council need to look at how we can best invest in a new or very much improved leisure facilities for Cranley, because it's got a limited lifespan as it currently stands. And finally, a major piece of work that we'll be doing is a health and wellbeing strategy. So that's been with us for 3 years. The action plan now is due for a renewal, updating, and that will be something that my colleagues will be working on over the next few months. Parks and countryside, green spaces. So this covers all the sort of green spaces which is within Waverley's ownership. So we have a ground maintenance contractor. Similarly to waste, we've gone through a recent retender, so we will be looking for our new contract to start on the 1st of November. That tender process has been completed, but we're currently within a standstill period whilst we inform all of those companies that tendered. So that will be something that we'll be looking to mobilise over the coming months in preparation for the 1st of November. We took that contract, was again part of the task and finish group from the Environment ONS. We went out purely on quality. It's quite a unique way of doing it, so we didn't want the contract bought in essence. So it was all dealt with on, this is how much we've got, what can you deliver for that contract, and it's really produced some quite innovative tenders, and it's been quite a success. So I look forward to coming back and telling you more about that in the coming months. The second one for our key objective is a new Heathland hub for French and Great Ponds. So at the moment we have, it's a bit grand to call it a visitor centre, but at the moment we have a visitor location where people who come to use a fantastic natural sort of inland beach. It's a beautiful setting. If you haven't been there, I thoroughly recommend going. But it's, again, an outdated building that doesn't really serve the numbers that come and visit during the summer months. We also have an archaic sort of car parking system that means my rangers are taken up at weekends during the summer months, issuing car parking tickets as opposed to ensuring people aren't littering the heathland or not behaving correctly. So that is something that we're really excited about. It's got Commons consent and planning permission, so we'll be looking to move forward with that project over the coming months. And then finally, we've got the new sort of green spaces strategy. That's to link to the local plan. So at the moment, we've identified infrastructure requirements that form part and parcel of previously Section 106 agreements, but now part of the SIL process, where we identify infrastructure demands placed on it by increased development, and that covers play areas, playing pitches. But one of the areas that hasn't been truly identified as an infrastructure that needs support is our wider green spaces. So that will be something we'll be looking to consult on over the summer months, and we'll be very much looking to go out to the community to talk about that. I'll come through the other ones quite quickly because as they're not part of this ONS, but I also have building control. That gives pre-app advice and makes sure the structures are safe and enforcement of any unauthorised work that carries on around the borough. The key focus for this team is to get an increased market share, to be a quality operator that's recognised, process applications, but really look to be the building control service that you would use if you're refurbishing, extending or building within the borough. So we're really looking to create a much more sort of agile way of working for our surveyors so that we can serve our customers much more efficiently. Careline. This is a community alarm service that helps people live independently at home for longer. A fantastic service. We currently have around 18 to 1900 clients that without this service could quite possibly be in residential home or in hospitals. So it's a great thing where they can press an alarm and alert friends, family or people or even the police or the ambulance service directly through our service to help them if they fall or anything happens within the home. So what we're really trying to do over the coming years is building our community alarm system, i.e. the numbers of people with those pendants, but also looking as technology improves, what else can we offer to help those people live at home for longer. Arts and culture, similarly to the health and wellbeing strategy, the cultural strategic action plan now needs to be reviewed. So we'll be kicking off consultation with key stakeholders and residents over the summer months to look at reviewing and looking to check that our cultural strategy fulfills its current role now. We work with partners, clearly some Farnham Maltings, Cranley Arts Centre and others to really look at delivering arts activities and programmes that improve health and wellbeing as well. It's not just fine art, it's about delivering programmes that engage people and keep them active. And then under this strand we have the Borough Hall and Memorial Hall, where we really want two of the assets owned by Waverley to work and be as well used by the community as possible. And finally, not least, is Waverley Trainer Services. So this is currently based at the Memorial Hall in Farnham, and it's one of sort of the unsung heroes of Waverley Borough Council. This is a fantastic service. It delivers a study programme for those young people that are not in education or employment, and helps get them to be employable, into jobs, into further education, and really works with some real niche key groups, as well as delivering apprenticeships not only in Waverley but across Surrey to really deliver a really fantastic training programme across for other local authorities in Surrey, as well as Kingston Hospital and the like. So it's a fantastic service, and what we really want to do over the coming years is increase the apprenticeship numbers offered and also help as many people back into employment and education as we can. So that was it, Chair. Whistle stop talk.
Yes, thank you,
very much.
Kelvin. No, it was all fascinating. Remember, we just had the parts and country.
Yes.
We're not overviewing the cultural strategy or anything.
No.
It's another committee. So, but again, probably just that slide, or unless anyone didn't make notes. But
Yes.
if you could give us the whole lot, it's fascinating. But
Thank you,
just
Sarah.
concentrate on the parts and countryside for the committee, please. Moving on then to Nora, yes, you're on. Item 9 is the corporate performance report, and I'm told it's Nora Coffin who's going to be introducing this to us. This is our first recommendation, although I'm not sure, given the time that we're at, as it were, that actually any recommendation is going to be of any particular use to anybody. But I'll take advice on that when we get there. But this, of course, breaks down what we've heard into sort of important figures, facts and figures about what we've just been hearing about in terms of service. I'm taking it that you've all read this, so you know what the issues are, the bright red ones. You know. So over to you, Nora. You ready?
Thank you very much. I can see quite a few familiar faces, but for those who don't know me, my name is, as it was said, Nora Copping. I'm the Policy and Performance Officer for the Council. And one of the roles that I fulfill within the Council is the preparation of the quarterly performance report that we're going to be looking at this evening. But I thought before we delve into this really exciting report with all these figures and numbers in it, it would be good for us to take a step back and just have a look why we prepared this report in the first place, what is the information that we put in this report, why we find it important. So I prepared a little diagram of our performance framework, and as Richard mentioned, everything starts at the very highest level with our corporate strategy. So everything we do, so corporate strategy is our kind of guiding document that sets our direction. The goals stated within the corporate strategy are derived from certain legal requirements, from the government policies, and also the needs that we have identified over the years in our communities, and the priorities that the current political administration might want to pursue as well. And underneath the corporate strategy, we have a list of lots of supportive kind of supportive strategies and plans as well. And the way we kind of translate high-level strategies and plans into the operational level is through the development of the service plans. So each of the service area will have service-specific plans, and underneath all those plans we have a very specific list of actions, objectives for the year ahead that tells us what we want to achieve. And within the performance report itself, we actually look at those actions and see how we're progressing them on target, are we doing what we have committed to do, and also some of the kind of the monitoring will break down a little bit further. So the actions that we will do, some of them will be our business as usual. Sometimes we have to do something out of ordinary, like for example, procurement of the waste contract, which isn't something that we do every year. So that would fall within the kind of corporate projects monitoring, and sometimes we would like to actually look at specific actions and monitor them even further and set specific targets. So for example, we would like to say to our contractor, we would like to have not more than 40 missed bins in a quarter, and for that we can actually set up a target and monitor those targets on a kind of quarterly basis or monthly basis through our performance indicators. So if you hear KPIs, PIs, that's usually key performance indicators or performance indicators. That's how we refer to them around the council. And there's also the other section, the service level monitoring. I have prepared little charts, so it doesn't really vary much from the corporate monitoring. Still, we have the key performance indicators, business as usual, and service level projects, but they fall under the monitoring and scrutiny of the heads of service and the managers. They wouldn't be the interest of this committee, but I thought it was valuable just to put it there in a slide as well. And they fit into the individual staff goals and targets that we set annually as well. So into the report structure, the report is introduced via the corporate dashboard, dashboard is just a fancy way for us to say a specific section within the report. There's many sections devoted to each service area. This specific ONS committee will be only asked to look at planning and environmental services. So when you look at the report, then it becomes a little bit overwhelming because there's so many pages, so many sections. It isn't for you to have to go and read all those pages for every ONS meeting. It is the specific planning and environmental services section that we would ask your comments and your feedback on. And now onto the dashboard. One thing I forgot to mention is last year we looked at the performance report because we have the performance report for the organizational purpose, and then we have the performance report that will go into the ONS committees, and we wanted to bring those reports into one report so we weren't duplicating the work, but also the data we were looking at was exactly the same at all the points throughout the process. So we are preparing the performance report at the moment that goes to the head of service meeting. They have their look, they look at the actions, they look at our performance, and they go and actually action everything that has to be actioned within the report. So if we are underperforming on some key performance indicators or service plans, it is for the head of service, for the organization to look at. So by the time we come to the ONS committee, all of those actions should be in motion as such. And the overview and scrutiny committee is asked to look at the areas where we had kind of some issues and how we actually are handling it going forward. So each of the dashboards have specific sections, so we will have key successes, lessons learned, and areas of concern. So every quarter, each head of service have a little quiet time in their offices when they reflect about what have happened in the past quarter, what were the things that we've done well, what were the lessons learned, what can we do better, do we need help with something, do we need to change some things, and all of that is put into the narrative that kind of introduces the rest of the service dashboard. Following that, we have the performance indicators, and you're going to hear a few times maybe around the report, RAG rating. All it is that RAG stands for is red, amber, green. So when we look at the performance indicators, we assess them. If they perform on target, then we assess them as performing in green. If they are just slightly off target, they will be amber, and if they are performing more than 5% off target, then we'll classify them as red. Now when we come to the matrix of the report itself, you will see that pattern as well happening and the trend. Next section is the service plans. So as I said, we prepare service plans annually. At the moment, I think we decided to go for the 3-yearly plan to pair it up with our medium-term financial plan. So at the end of every quarter, we are looking at the list of the actions, objectives that we wanted to deliver in that point in time and assess whether they are on track for delivery, off track for delivery. Do we need some additional attention to the specific areas as well? And sometimes we might decide that we actually don't want to pursue an action and we would like to kind of deploy resources somewhere else, and action might be cancelled or transferred to a different project. We also include in the performance report internal audit actions, just a quick kind of overview on how many outstanding internal audit actions we have. It is not for this committee to analyze the performance of internal audit because that lays with the audit committee, and further details can be found in those meetings. We have also status on complaints and workflows as well. And I think that's probably it for the dashboard. So if I could take the committee now to the page 28 of the performance report, so we can look at it through the report together. So the report is structured. The performance indicators are put in a table, and we have various columns indicating different information. So the first column would present the reference number of the indicator, and in the second column we have the description of the performance indicator. And now, depending on what type of input, what kind of measure it is, we might be aiming to have a higher outcome as a better result. It's possible that we actually want to decrease the number. So we've put in, for each of the indicators, there is in brackets little description indicating whether we are aiming to increase the numbers or decrease, just to kind of understand the figures. We always present the 5 rolling quarters, so we see what is happening throughout the year, but also the same quarter from the year before, so we can look at the trends and analyze them that way. And as you can see, most of the indicators for planning are actually performing in green. We have also 2 different types of indicators. Some of them will be our statutory indicators, those that the government asks us to have in place, the ones that we have to return the figures on. So indicator, for example, the 2nd, 3rd and the 4th one, P151, P153 and P123. On our major application, non-major application and other applications, which are the kind of national governmental indicators, we are performing very well, but we also put in place a list of other indicators that allows us to kind of measure the progress, our progress as our planning service progress, I suppose. And we have a couple of indicators which are performing in red this quarter. The indicator LP2, which assesses all planning appeals allowed and out of all planning appeals determined, is an indicator that always has some performance issues, as you can see throughout the year, and there's been a lot of work done with the officers and the members as well to kind of have additional training to allow us to have the good decision-making mechanism in place and get that figures down. So I think there will be further investigation into that, what we can actually do as authority to address that going forward. I'm not sure if there's something that Paul might want to add on the on the point. Moving on. And then percentage of enforcement cases, action within 12 weeks. It is quite unusual for this indicator to be performing in red, and this was due to the work pressure within the team, and that has been already resolved, so there was additional resources put in place to address it, so we should that figure going up. If we turn to the next page, which is page 29 of the agenda, go to the service plans. So as I've mentioned, that section will be showing us how we are progressing our service plans. And this is the exciting part of the year because we are at the end of the year, so we actually can have a look how we've done throughout the four quarters that we had in the years. 94% of the service plans for planning service area have performed on target, and the handful that has not have been listed underneath the little overall chart. So one of them needed an additional extension of time, and 3 of them will be executed. So our transfers will be executing them within the new service plan as well. And one of the action will be transferred to the customer service project. So we will still pursue those actions going forward, but just in a kind of different time scales. Turning to page 30. We have a couple of internal audit actions, and as I said, that will be analyzed, the monitoring of that section will be analyzed during the audit committee on the 22nd of July. With regards to complaints and excellent performance from the team, there were some issues with regards to the response rates on level 1 last quarter, but due to the newly introduced process, the performance of the response rate for level 1 complaints have risen from 36% in quarter 3 to 95%, which is an excellent result for the team. With regards to workforce, we provide some statistics on that as well, so we have a little chart with some information on what's happening within the service areas. We have quite healthy turnover. I think there's some other elements and I think training to retain the staff within the service area and create some opportunities for growth of staff. Moving on to environmental services, so page 31 of your agenda, or no, page 32. Again, the little map of the performance indicators tells us a little bit of a story. So we started 4 quarters ago and 5 quarters ago with 3 or 4 red indicators for the service, and we've ended up this quarter just with 1 indicator in red, which even against its own kind of measures and standards has dropped. So I think it's an excellent performance from the team. I think the reject rates are usually the issues, I think, if I remember correctly, due to the changes of the type of materials that our material, what are they called now?
Processes.
Material process, yes. Processes, what type of materials our kind of, what are they called? Processors, material processors. What type of materials our kind of processors and the countries that the recycling is going onwards, what type of materials will be accepted, and that actually limits, that basically impacts on the rate of the type of, I suppose, am I saying it correctly, Richard?
Yes.
Am I?
I think we're all with you, Nora. Don't
Sorry,
worry.
thank you, sorry. Materials, process materials.
It was very clear.
Lovely, okay, thank you. And another indicator that wasn't performing that well in the quarter was the satisfaction of business with local authorities, and that was due to one business that did not like the feedback it received from the council, so it didn't give us as good score as we would hope for, and that's expected. So I don't think it's anything to throw the team for. We also included the air quality links for those who have access to or see the agenda in kind of online format. You will be able to click on those links, and it will take you directly to the Air Quality England website to show you the most up-to-date information. But I will try to also include actually written link for everyone else going forward, for everyone else who actually wants to type these details and is using paper agenda as well. With regards to service plans, again 91% completion rate, very good completion rates of service plans, and there's a list of few actions that will require a little bit more time for us to complete, and the new revised due date are presented just on the on the page 33 of the agenda pack, and one of the service plans will be executing it under the new service plans. With regards to complaints, a little bit lower response rate at level 1 due to a few complex cases that happen sometimes. We are not specifically worried about this area, and with regards to workforce profile, we have quite healthy staff turnover compared to the average within the council, and all of the posts that we needed recruiting for have been recruited. Now moving on to Kelvin's area, I think the only area that we'll be looking at is his first introductory page on page 35 with regards to ground maintenance contract. I think that's the only area under the remit of this committee. And I think there is a contract that the procurement process is just starting now, just finished now. So that's probably all from me with regards to performance. If there are any questions, my head of service will be more than happy to answer.
Any questions? I must say it's very clear, isn't it? I mean, when I think of some of the paperwork we've had in the past, where really, even if you read it a dozen times, you're still none the wiser. This is very clear, and we can see very clearly where there's areas. What I don't understand as a committee is how we influence it, because by the time we're getting it, you have already put in place all the measures to improve the reds and get the ambers sort of organised. And I don't really see what our recommendation is, but perhaps somebody can help me on that.
I think that the reason for the report to come to the committee is for you to be aware of everything that is happening within the council, and there might be areas sometimes for us.
I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
I have a problem with the fact that it's suggesting a recommendation, and I don't understand how we can recommend anything.
I think sometimes, with the best will in the world, if there's an adverse trend that you look at and say, could we just go into a bit more detail here? Sometimes that has happened in the past.
And who would that recommendation go to?
Well, you would work with the head of service and sort of say, can we work with you to find out what's going on here?
Right, so it's sort of internal recommendation as opposed to something that will go through executive into council.
I think, Chair, it might also flag up things that you might want to look at in your scrutiny work.
Yeah.
That's a different matter.
Yes.
I've been making notes all the way through. Does anybody have a question for Nora? John, Councillor Grazer.
Yeah, just a simple one. Can you explain transferred? Just so I understand, I think I know what the word means, Is this an excuse? Is this so that the head of service can move it on to someone else, or what is it?
No, the transfer means that the action has not been executed. We don't want to cancel that action. We don't want to defer it. We'll continue that action, but we will just continue it. And next to the transfer, you should see where exactly that action was transferred to. So maybe it wasn't quite clear. So most of the cases we transfer it to the service plan for the year ahead. So we have not abandoned the action. We're just going to transfer the execution of that action for the year ahead. And sometimes we have to transfer it because it was superseded by a project that we are running, so it was kind of taken into some specific project, for example.
So in reality, they weren't achieved, but you can continue to monitor the performance over the coming service plan year. So it will be part of the...
So I should expect to see it picked up?
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
So I
Councillor.
shall keep an eye on that to make sure you do.
Yes. Yes,
Councillor
Paul.
Hunt? Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think that's the equivalent of fired, isn't it? But for financial use, it's just another confusing word, so we don't really know what we're doing. On page 24, Chairman, top left corner, we see environment, and this is in respect of complaints. There were 10 complaints, 6 dealt with on time, 60% response rate within the time period, and that's the lowest of any of the issues that are in front of us. So the first thing, perhaps Richard would just explain to us why we had a little peak or a trough, whichever way around you like to look at it, on those figures. Is there anything for us to be concerned about in that respect?
Well, I think it does say in the narrative there that those complaints were particularly complex and required a lot of research to dig out technical information to respond to those complaints. Quite often it's not as simple as saying yes or no. It's a case of going around researching what's gone on over a period of time and then getting back to the complainant. And you can't always do that within 10 working days.
So there's no time extension involved within that which you can use, unlike freedom of information. You can give yourself another 20 or 28 days.
No, this is a clear target, and because of the amount of research, we didn't reach that, didn't deliver within that target time. Normally, we do quite well in this.
Yeah.
On page 27?
I'm not going to go through page by page, but how many
No,
more
there
have you
are
got?
3 or 4 items on here.
Well, can we just get down to 2 or 3? Otherwise, we've all read our papers. If you've got something you can take offline, you can take it offline. If you've got something that's important for the committee to hear, then let's hear it.
Well, I think so. I wouldn't bother saying it otherwise, Chairman. I was the Chairman of this committee for the past 3 years, and I know there's no continuity, really, which is in a very strange position here. That probably hasn't
Can you
happened.
just get on with your question,
Maybe.
please?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. On page 27, about 2/3 of the way down the page, it says the Council defended High Court challenges. So the claimants have now lodged a challenge on 2 grounds to the Court of Appeal, which is to be heard later this year. Can you clarify? I thought that was going to be perhaps later this week or this month at the hearing.
Well, the Court of Appeal is next Monday, but at the time of writing, I didn't have the date.
That's sure. There was one, just a clarification of wording on page 30, Chairman, where it says down the bottom under workforce, quarter 4 comment, the introduction of a higher tariff for professional membership. Should I read tariff as being salary or bonus, or is it a different meaning? What is that referring to?
Previously, there was a professional bar within the planning officer and senior planning officer post. There was a professional bar put in place, which was set at a certain level. It was set at 7B in the professional bar. With the agreement of the Joint Consultative Committee, that bar's been raised to bar 6C. What that means is, what's been happening is that we've had a number of junior planning officers that we've been putting through planning school and training up. In other places, once they've got their qualification as opposed to professional qualification, they get a salary increase, and they've been going elsewhere to achieve that. We've introduced this professional bar now, so it means they've got basically a longer period. They can move up slightly quicker and be retained within the council.
So we're no longer training people for private industry, which is nice,
Exactly.
and it's working for us that way.
Well, I
presumably
sincerely
costing us a
hope
bit
so. I mean, as spent quite a bit of time trying to get that through, so I'm
Personally,
personally
always has been.
committed to that.
And just that issue that Richard raised, and it's on page 31 at the bottom of the section, it's the issues, key successes and lessons. You mentioned that it is an ongoing thing which members might be questioned about by, because it was on the front page of the Herald, saying who cares basically about the deer in the park being killed by dogs. I did raise this a few weeks ago with Richard in a training section, a sort of training session, and he said that we didn't know exactly who it was. I did raise that then on social media and with our ranger at Farnham Park, and was told that we do know who it is, and because they live in Aldershot or Rushmore, that it is being taken care of by Hampshire Police. In fact, people do care. It's unfortunate the Herald didn't know that we do care, and we're taking care of that. But it is being looked into, and I think that's probably everything. Thank you very much indeed for your indulgence, Chairman.
My pleasure, Councillor Hammond. Councillor Townsend?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask, going on to page 27, that I noticed that there's going to be a programme approach to project management for the key strategic sites.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to ask whether or not you will automatically be sharing that with ward councillors, or if it's something that the ward councillors will have to come to you specifically to request.
No, we can share that.
That would be really helpful, thank you. And the other one was just on the recruitment side of things. I noticed that obviously we advertised for 18 jobs and managed to fill 9. How is that going at the moment? Are we still on that level, or has it got improved?
It's improved, and I've had, including next week, we'll have 4 permanent members of staff starting with us, 2 last week, 2 next week. And with the remaining posts, we've taken a slightly different view to procurement rather than going out individually. We've packaged them up into a bundle, and we're speaking to an agency who's going to do it on a risk basis to assist us with that. So I'm hopeful that certainly by the end of July, then we've paid off offers to the majority of those outstanding posts.
I think we'd all appreciate continuity, wouldn't we? It's very difficult when you're chopping and changing. You're not building up the relationships that are necessary to deliver a good service. Can we move on from this item, or does anybody else have any other questions for Nora? Yes, Mr. Darcy?
Which is, it mentions the service plans, most of them have been completed. Is there a list of completed service plans?
I suppose we had a kind of strategic approach to service planning, so we do not any longer, in the past we would have a comprehensive, detailed report, but because we want to just concentrate on things that we are not doing well and kind of leave everything else, where it was. If you are interested in the details, I'm sure that head of service will be able to provide the information of what exactly was the scope of those plans, so we can compare the documents. I suppose what was agreed at the beginning of the year and what we actually delivered, what we haven't delivered, if that's of interest.
And presumably we get the new service plans at the beginning of next year too.
They have already been approved, I believe, at the previous ONS cycle, but they will be reviewed again.
For us.
Yes,
Yeah.
so beginning probably in January, and they will come back to the ONS committee for the review.
Okay. Right. Have you another question?
Just to be helpful, Chairman, that if Councillor Darcy would like to look at the service plans, they're in the March round of meetings. I'm not sure that they're in the executive papers. I think they're in the ONS meeting papers. So they are online for you. You can look at them in the March round.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Nora. That's really, I'm really thrilled that you can actually read them. I hate things that you have to battle through, and still none the wiser. So, if everyone agrees that there's really no recommendation from that, can we move on to item 10? This is, does anybody else want to introduce this? This came from the chairman of the Value for Money Customer Service chairman, who wanted to repopulate, I suppose is the word, a group that is obviously a very useful group built in leading up to the budget. And you can see that they're asking if there's somebody from this group who would like to join the budget strategy working group, preferably somebody who's got a vague idea about budgeting in number, but always willing to take a volunteer. So do we have anybody who is willing to put themselves forward to be part of the budget, working with the other groups, obviously? we're all looking at,
One
is
substitute.
this substitute, yeah. We're all looking
I'm
at...
looking at Councillor Gray and
Yeah, I think we're all looking
Councillor
at-
Townsend and
yeah.
Councillor Gray. And,
Yes.
Right, does anybody, I mean, we can go to a vote on this, or are you quite happy,
Yes,
Councillor
please vote
Townsend? To Councillor Gray, anybody else like to put their
I
names
don't think
forward?
there's a limit, Chairman.
I was just going to say, I haven't asked whether we could have two, so, you know, I'm assuming it's one per... Louise is going to clarify.
I mean, I think if you wanted to, that would be fine, but I mean, it's just a manageable group. If every committee had two people, then it might get a bit unwieldy, but if there's interested people who want to, then it's fine.
Chairman, sorry, I'm Peter Biggs, Head of Finance here. So I tend to lead the group with Yasmin and Louise. So it's not, we're not necessarily looking for people with a lot of budget detail. This is about service delivery, and there's a lot of detail in the report about that. So it's about coming up with a strategy to solve the budget gap that we've identified. We need to solve 3.86 million. We need some solutions in place by the end of March 2022. There's 5 work streams that are working consecutively. Work stream 2 is a public consultation, which will start imminently. Work stream 3 is really where we need some help now, so we need people on the group that can understand the detail of the services that the council's delivering, and look for lots of different options of how we can move forward in terms of where we want to take the council within the corporate strategy, and what the future council will look like while solving the budget gap, which is, like I say, 3.86 million as it stands today. So it doesn't have to be particularly budget-minded people. Business-minded would be very useful.
I'm certainly not going to have a fight with you in Committee Room 1, but I would have thought, if you are seeking if you've got a deficit, budget deficit, you do need people who are vaguely numerate to work out how they could possibly. We could all wish, but I mean, wishing is not going to do us much good when we've got a budget deficit. We do need more than the dreamers of this world. I mean, I'll go happily on any committee and dream, but the idea of actually having to nail down some solutions to a budget deficit, I beg to differ. I think you need to be a little bit. So we have one. So we're all looking at Councillor Gray, but we will certainly ask Councillor Townsend if there's any role you could play on it, because I think both of you would be very valuable. Councillor Hyman?
The situation over the past year was that no one on this committee actually really wanted to take part in doing that. So this committee didn't actually put anyone forward. Another committee's made up for it, I suppose, in some way. So to have more than one, I think, would just make up for others. But this is obviously an executive function. This is the executive who needs to solve this problem, really, and it's where overview and scrutiny can support them and help. Can I, please, just ask whether I am allowed to help or not on that? I thought not, but I don't know.
I don't think you can just go onto a working group from the committee, can you?
I don't know whether you can or not.
I think, well, we've never done that before with substitutes, because
I don't think there's anything that actually precludes it.
I think 2 is more than enough, to be honest. Thank you, Councillor Hyman. But the same proviso that if no other committee produces anybody, we could have 3. See, change of chairman and suddenly everyone's willing to go on the budget working group. It's extraordinary, isn't it? Yes,
Councillor Hyman is on the value for money stream, so therefore he can help himself on.
Oh, fine. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Right, everyone quite happy then that we get on with that important piece of work in the best of luck. Thank you. And the group. Can we now look at really what's the most important bit? And in fact, at our training, our chairman's training, he said really this should be right at the beginning, the forward work programme, didn't he? Not tacked on at the end. Wendy, you're going to talk us through this, I think, but again, it's very clear, I think.
Yes, Chairman. So what I have set out in the briefing paper were the forward plan that we have been working to under the previous term. you'll see that the current work programme had a number of standing reports, the corporate performance report, which you've just heard from Nora about. We had a corporate priorities and an air quality standing report, and then we had a number, so from item 4 onwards, of work that we thought was likely to be coming through this ONS committee in the near future. And we were also holding, you can see at the bottom of page 3, 2 items for
65.
Yeah. Sorry, the committee page just got mine.
Back to the middle number.
So we've got two items that we were holding as potential interest. Clearly the work programme can change shape, it can change the topics, the priorities and how we undertake the scrutiny work. I have set out the work programme to give really a flavour and an understanding of a number of quite meaty subjects were anticipated for coming forward into the next couple of committee meetings. That doesn't mean to say that has to be the case. We could change the priorities, we could change the topics. So what I'm particularly looking for the committee tonight is to clarify the September committee, so officers can go away and know what they're working towards. But Chairman, we really need to have some clarity about, perhaps, given the number of fairly meaty items coming forward, car parking, local plan part 2, the dog control consultation, how we might want to deal with that and whether they are indeed the items for priority. Indeed, that there will be a whole raft of other themes and issues and concerns that councillors will be wishing to put onto the agenda as well. So I think it's a discussion.
Yes, I think if you look at section A of the work programme, it repeats some of the, obviously, the words that are in that one. So to get an idea of what Wendy's suggesting, and I have to say, you start off, don't you, and you think, oh, I want to look at this and this and this. Then you realise the ongoing stuff is quite meaty, so before we start. So if you look at what we're suggesting, obviously the performance reports, the air quality status report coming in September, I don't think anyone would argue with that. I hope they wouldn't. The update on the public space protection order, and like a bit of dog poo to stimulate the old brain cells. That, I think, has to be looked at.
It's not dog poo.
No. Oh, sorry, it's it's dog lead, sorry, you did tell me. It's where you can actually speak to poo a bit, isn't it? But anyway, it's where you actually have dogs on leads and dogs without leads, is that correct? So that's obviously coming back in. Anything else that we have got on the night? I mean, has anybody got any item that's pressing that we ought to put in for the September meeting?
Chairman, I just feel that we should be looking very closely at our planning enforcement at some stage. Whether that will be more important than any other of these items is obviously to be decided, but I think our planning enforcement...
What I was trying to work out, Councillor Ells, and I don't disagree with you, I did raise it with Wendy. One of the problems here is we're supposed to be scrutinising, having an overview of a strategic matter rather than
okay.
And I was trying to think of a strategic angle on it that wasn't basically, analysing service. And I haven't quite come up with the words, but if you can and put them through Wendy, then I have no issue with that.
Perhaps we can have a chat about that.
Well, did you wish to say?
Only, Chair, that the part of the transformation programme is a review of enforcement services across the council.
Now, can you give us a timetable on this? Or
I can't at the moment, but I certainly can let you know. It's something I was talking with my director and colleagues about. There's certainly one of the work streams in the business transformation programme for the council is to review how we deal with enforcement across the council.
And that includes every form of enforcement?
Yes. All
and
frontline
have we got a vague
activity.
timetable for that?
I think that could even be also, sorry Chair, I think that could even be on the agenda for value for money work programme sort of next Monday. I think
Right, we need to have a look at that.
We can come back to that.
Okay, so we'll put that on a possible list if that's right with you, councillor. Look at it. So, I'm trying to judge how long that's actually going to take us to look at. I feel, we're perhaps one topic light still, are we? Or what do you think, Wendy? You're more...
I think it's entirely whether the committee feel that the proposed topics are the priority that they want to concern themselves with, and whether they in this priority. But it would be interesting to understand other things that were coming through.
Yeah. Right, I'll take Councillor Hyman first, indicate those.
Sorry, I did want to point out that I'm substituting Councillor Brian Edmonds, a new councillor. He had, I did ask him whether there was anything that he would want to put onto the agenda or of particular interest, and he did say that he would like the council's approach to the environmental impact assessment regulations. Now, I'm not entirely certain that that is a thing that this committee should be looking at anyway, because it should probably be the Joint Planning Committee looking at it, and it should probably go through a briefing. In fact, we were meant to have a briefing last year in respect of how EIA is applied. But he did ask that, and so if other members wanted to, then obviously, I'm not going to be here at most meetings anyway, it's just a catch-up on that,
I think
Chairman.
for the same reason, I'm not sure it's quite the best use of the time. We only have 10 hours, as Wendy keeps telling us, so we do really want to concentrate on matters that we can actually make a difference. There's no real point. Sorry, Councillor, can you indicate as well?
I mean, on that theme, I'm particularly keen to see the extended use of Article 4 directions to take some priority here, because I do think that is an area where we can have a big impact.
Well, my problem with that is the timing of it, because of the September one. Paul, you wanted to say something?
Just on the matter of EIAs, when we gave the presentation to members on May 15th, we did say we'd be running a series of briefings throughout the year going forward. And in fact, the briefing in July is on affordable housing. That's the first, and I anticipate we'll be doing more of that as we go through the year. So I'll be more than happy to take an EIA briefing at one of those sessions.
Right. Okay. Well, just going back to the September agenda. I mean, a lot of the things that are coming up in November, which is quite frustrating. Local plan pot 2. There's a whole lot of things. I agree with Wendy has suggested place shaping in Article 4, and I think both of those probably will be interesting as long as the place shaping is borough-wide. But again, it's what we can get in place for an officer to work up to get something on the agenda, because we need something on the agenda, and that's the bit I can't understand. A topic that we could bring in November, because as I say, I think in September. I think from November onwards, it's quite full on. From November. You've got the car park review, you've got local plan pot 2, I mean, just those two together really. And certainly we can put in Article 4 directions. I think it's something we should look at.
I'm not sure how big a piece of work it is, but because the programme's so full further on, if it can't be slotted in September, I'm not sure when it will re-emerge.
So, Article 4 directions? Is it a topic that we could look at, or is it just something that will come up in planning?
Well, it is going to come up in planning. We've already committed to do a piece of work around Article 4s. There is a resource implication which we've already raised because we've got the local plan work running alongside that. But we can certainly bring a report forward in September on that. It might be that it's a scoping report.
You're on that next. I think that would probably be helpful, wouldn't it, to sort of kick-start it, and if people have got, because certainly as far as I know, we've only ever used one, haven't we, in the borough?
I think we've used more than one Article 4 in the past. I'm going back several years now, but most recent Article 4, because it was actually it's a joint planning committee function to agree the Article 4 directions. It wasn't an executive function, so we did agree last year to do the Article 4 as a trial in Beacon Hill, and we still have a lot of interest. So we're actually in very active discussions at the moment with Godalming, because they've actually procured some evidence to look at this, but we know that there's also a lot of interest from other places, Farnham, Hazelmere, and Crackney, have all at various times talked about the potential for Article 4s, but clearly there is that wider resource issue that goes with all of that, because obviously if they're quite large areas, there's a lot of work involved in putting that together and prioritising that.
I think ultimately what I feel as a committee, and I hope other people agree with me, is joining all these things up, isn't it? It's having the planning system and our biodiversity aims and, you know, all of these things working together to get the best, you know, instead of looking at one little tiny item, it's how the whole thing's joined up so that across the borough we have planning decisions made with biodiversity in mind, with, you know, resilience, all sorts of things, so that we're not doing it in little compartments, if you see what I mean, so that we're getting a full picture of what the borough needs and how best we can deliver it. Councillor Townsend, your name?
Sorry, I was just going to say, thank you, Chairman, was that I'm a little bit concerned because of the resources at the moment within the planning department of putting any extra sort of pressure on them to deliver anything at this moment in time whilst they're bedding in new staff and that, perhaps. I mean, I'm not sure what to suggest. I was trying to think of something small that could be added to the work programme that wasn't too large. And this may be a shot in the dark, but one of the things that I've been very concerned about, and is a concern across the borough, is the ash dieback on trees and the extent and the loss of trees and the cost eventually to the council of replacing those trees and the cost to removing those trees, etc. And whether or not that's a small piece of work or whether or not it's a huge piece of work, I'm not quite sure, but it is something that could be an expense going forward that could actually end up being a quite a costly area to us. So whether or not we are looking at that, you know, our plans for the ash dieback, our plans for how we're looking at the replacement tree programme and that, because we've lost quite a few in Cranley. So whether or not that's a small piece of work that could slot in, or whether it's totally inappropriate for the work programme, I'm open to thinking about.
I think all of us worry about our green spaces and our biodiversity and our what's the words? You know, the sort of stepping stones and the corridors, all these things. I think, you know, across the borough, it's something that worries me. But as I say, we look at our own little bit or one planning application. We never seem to look at biodiversity, the green spaces and planning, and yet it's all one and the same thing if you think about it. It's all about quality of life for, you know, people that are living in our borough. So I'm just throwing that out in the hope that one or two of the officers can come up with it.
Yeah, there's two elements. Obviously, we will be beginning the consultation on the green spaces management strategy, which I think will be a really good piece of work that hopefully members of this group will form an integral part of that working group. With regard to ash dieback and the pressures, there's also oak procession moths that we have that are now reaching the trees in Waverley. That sits under our tree risk management guide. So we, I don't know, Chair, whether it's too small an item, but obviously the green spaces will be coming forward. There is something we can bring to your attention and bring you up to speed with the tree risk management guide, how we deal with the challenge in ash dieback, oak procession moth and tree risk in the borough.
I think that would be an interesting topic. Would anyone else disagree with that?
Yes, I would agree. And I think we've already started. We've already replaced some of our ash trees in Farnham Park, haven't we? But there's another disease which isn't spoken very much about at the moment, I think. I don't know what it is, but I think that our trees are under huge risk at the moment. I don't know what the third disease is.
Yeah, the ones we have real financial pressures on will be ash dieback and oak procession moths.
Things.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, Councillor Hyman?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, what I've heard from residents and from local businesses, particularly in respect of planning, is that they have a lot of concerns at the moment in respect of the time being taken to validate planning applications, and I don't know whether officers would like to comment on as to whether there's anything that this committee might be able to do in that respect. Also, they have concerns in respect of the cost of the advice service that we provide. You know, that might be something else which, you know, we're here to serve them, the other people out there, not what we particularly want to look at necessarily. Architects certainly want us to look at perhaps providing more staff resources so that they can get their applications in quicker. But as far as this committee is concerned, I'd suggest, have we got a new infrastructure delivery plan, please, Mr Homewood? Because if that is now available, this committee perhaps should look at that. And in particular, one of the things that the planning committee is going to get coming to them in future possibly is a lot of viability studies, and there's a question of whether we could perhaps provide some sort of standard format to something so that we're looking at all these viability studies properly, because it's really complicated.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you. What I disagree with you on that these are strategic matters. As far as I can see, they are matters for you know, the paid staff, you know, to get right. But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. What I'm getting at the moment is that there's support certainly for the trees and an update on that. Article 4, we didn't really come back. Is it a big piece of work, in which case we can delay it? I mean,
well, potentially could be a big piece of work, but I think what we can do is sort of scope that out and bring that back
later.
And any progress that's being made, particularly in relation to government, we can bring that back as well.
Okay, that's fine. Sorry, Councillor Gray.
Just going back to the two questions, the Article 4 and the trees, and it strikes me that we really should be looking at a strategy. Shouldn't we have a strategy on the deployment and the use of Article 4? I think we were told that the one we've got at the moment, it was a trial and we were going to follow it up. Further use, etc. Where is that being picked up? Where is the executive taking this forward? At what point will they say it's been successful and they can roll it out to others? That really should then be the trigger for planning to resource up to what they want to do.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's no point just, you know, doing the odd Article 4. We should be looking at what we're trying to achieve by our actions.
And my point on the trees is this committee hasn't seen the service plans. I mean, we've got, you've mentioned 2, but there's honey fungus, there's other things basically going on at the moment. And there are a lot of people, not just ourselves, but the landowners who are going to have an issue. Where is the strategy? Where is Waverley's strategy to replace them, to do everything else? I mean, I want to, rather than worry about the cost, yes, there's a cost. Yes, there's a risk assessment that you've got to do, but I'm assuming that's business as usual. But where's the thinking? Is there a need for the strategy? I don't know the answer to that question.
No, neither do I at the moment. Councillor Ellis I've got, and Councillor Townsend.
Well, I was just going to ask a minute. We can manage our own disease trees, but it's not in our gift to manage other landowners' trees at all. So we couldn't include them in our strategy, could we?
That's correct. But unless there's the wider strategy with the green spaces strategy takes on how we deal with all other issues.
I was going to say, you see, this is why I keep coming back to this green spaces strategy, which is something I really want and I want to work, but that's not going to come in September.
No,
so,
it's not. No.
You know, we're trying to think of things. I think basically we're going to have a light agenda in September, as far as I can see, because I can't see that we can produce anything. I've got Councillor, hang on, glasses on. I think it's Townsend. It is.
Sorry, I was just going to say, totally agree with what John said, you know, there needs to be a strategy. We do have an awful lot of trees, which we are responsible for. I mean, we really do. And perhaps there are opportunities for us to offer a service, a paid service, out to landowners. Because, you know, if they want to come, why not come to us? We've got some experts who work here in the council, really know their tree stuff. So I think that's an opportunity maybe to look for a paid service that perhaps you know, the landowners could use to have a look at their trees and also recommend action.
Right, I'm coming round, stop me if I'm misjudging this, to the fact that the September committee is going to be quite light. It's just a fact of the timing.
I did have the dog control on September.
Oh yes, no, I've got that one on, and the local plan, but everything else is sort of November time. Local plan's November time. So, you know, well, it looks fairly light to me, Wendy. You know, I mean, I'm not doing all the hard work, you know. So I think perhaps for September we probably ought to leave it as we have it, waiting for the green spaces. Jenny?
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say that there is a small thing which worries me and has worried me for some time, but it might not be appropriate. It's to do with environmental health, it's to do with their food hygiene checks. And I wonder whether this committee could do this with this new piece of work, examine the extent of the food hygiene checks, how far they actually go. Because one of my bugbears, and it's not appropriate for this committee, I'm sure you'll tell me straight away, is that domiciliary care workers are not checked. They are food operators, they are professional food operators, they're paid to provide food for vulnerable people in their own homes, but they have absolutely no check whatsoever on their practices. Oh, that's a question perhaps I should, rather than a statement. Do they? Because I think I know the answer.
Well, I mean, are you going to get it now, or is this again a piece of work that we have
I
to
need to go
later?
away and talk to my colleague, the environmental health manager. But I know it's something you've mentioned before,
Well,
isn't it?
Perhaps we could
It's
have
not a big piece.
well, no, I mean, perhaps we could have a small piece of information on environmental health generally, because it is an interesting topic, and then we can take it further with when we see and whether or not, you know, there's again, you know, it's getting some bigger picture out of this, you know, rather than.
I'm sure we can bring you something about how the food hygiene enforcement service works.
Well, yes, I mean, their guidelines are that we should be checking it, but they're only guidelines, and we're not. So I think that would just be interesting to examine a little bit further if it's appropriate for this committee to do that.
I would have thought so, wouldn't I? Yes,
So
if we
that's
can do
in
that.
September.
Councillor Hyman?
I've only a little bit of experience in respect of the Article 4 directions, which people are very keen to look at. It came to us through joint planning. I think it was a year to 18 months ago. When I get home, I can tell you when it came through, which committee papers. There's a report there already written for us, which was done and came to us, which I don't think would need updating much for it to be able to understand the scope of, and this is obviously.
I don't think that was the point Councillor Gray was making, or that I'm making. What we're trying to achieve across the borough is the best of all possible outcomes in whichever sphere we're delivering a service. This is how, correct me if I'm wrong, so the Article 4 we're looking at is not knowing what an Article 4 is, I mean we can find that out, but it's looking across the borough at areas that would need or could benefit from an Article 4 direction. And that's how I see it, rather than saying, oh, we've got a problem here, we'll, you know, bring it into joint planning. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that's...
It's the strategy of the use.
Exactly that. That's how I see our role as this committee, is looking across the borough and saying, you know, are we joining up our services where they should join up? Because that's the bit that I think we can get wrong because we, you know, are in our little silos. And I think the whole thing would, you know, as I say, to me it all, as a councillor, it all works together. You know, I'm not paid to think along straight lines, you know. So basically, green spaces, the health of trees, well-being of people, houses, the design of houses, whether or not we should be protecting the high street, it's the whole borough. And that's what I think this committee should be doing. At the end of 4 years, I'd like us to be able to say, what have we done that's improved the life of our residents?
And it's of interest to me, and it can either be done as a feedback, but I don't understand the scope of green spaces at the moment. And we've raised the issue of trees. Could we either have something which tells us what the scope of it, and when it comes up, maybe that's something we could just have at the next committee meeting.
I mean, one thing I learnt this morning from Noel Moss, fount of all information, is that the parks have different ways of looking at wildflowers and that sort of thing from the countryside. So the countryside has a way of looking after sort of verges and wildflowers, whereas parks doesn't. You know, and you think, well, come on, you know, I mean, a park is just a civilised green space, but I mean, the things that... You remember the park keeper from the past, you know. You know, I just think again that, you know, if we've got green spaces of any kind, we should be maximising what we do with them, both for you know, biodiversity, but also for the people. I mean, to me, it's all one.
So I support to exactly what John said. So if we could see the scope of the green spaces and see that it was including the trees as well, please. And that, you know, that would be really helpful, because we may pick out something from that scoping document that we would like to drill further into.
No, that would be a good idea. So, Wendy, do you want to read back what we've got so far?
So I think generally we seem content with the September programme. So Nora will do her quarterly performance. We'll have Richard with the annual air quality status report and the dog control. And then I've got Calvin with the scope of the green spaces, and Richard also with the environmental health, food hygiene. Yep. And then we have also got, let's have a quick look.
That was particularly for the domiciliary.
For the domiciliary, yeah.
Thank you.
What else have I got? The environmental impact assessment. Paul, you said you were going to be picking up in the site. Wayne?
As members' briefings, yeah.
Member briefings, yeah. So we talked about Article 4 and doing some scoping work, but not probably for the September session. We talked about trees in particular and the strategy, and that's something that needs to go onto the full plan.
Yes, and you know, we'll do
the strategy, the
scoping first of all, then we'll
the page
strategy.
Yeah. So we've got that as an item. We've got some talk about planning application time from Councillor Hyman.
No, I
You didn't feel that was a
no,
strategic point. And environmental health. So I think that's got everything.
Well done, God, you're a miracle.
Just shout if I've missed.
And then we've got plenty of time now to look at the other matters, but I think they're so important, the ones, local plan part 2. Anyone who's been anywhere near a planning inquiry will know why we need local plan part 2 and all our main neighbourhood plans as quickly as possible. So I don't think there's any doubt about that. And we've got the bigger issue of, as I say, the more place shaping, Article 4s, all of that. It all actually sort of works together as far as I can see. It's an overview of what we're achieving in the borough and what we can put in place to you know, but that's for down the line, I think. Is everyone quite happy with that? I think that'll keep you going in September. Right, is that, do we have any other matters? I don't have any press of public need to be excluded. So that's the end of the meeting. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
I'll just book